We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well-funded.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the French Connections Monday edition. Today's date is the 14th day of September 2009. My name is Daryl Bradford Smith, and of course we're here to further our efforts at exposing the crime gang and the problems that we all face as human beings in this world, being part of a family that is divided, being part of a family that is at war with itself over the allowing of certain groups to describe themselves in ways that have led to actions by people that have destroyed the cohesiveness of the human family. And in fact, right now we are on the precipice, on the cusp of destroying everything we hold dear in this world. But at the same time, there's reason for hope. There's a lot of hope out there that for the first time in maybe ever, since this crime gang has had its grips around our throat, we're beginning to take the world back, and it's happening in a way that no one could have predicted, although we were all there hoping it would, and it is happening. And I have a guest today, somebody important to me. Early on in this battle, we had a falling out with one another over associations we had, and I followed one path with an association that turned out to be terrible for me, and it didn't work out, and I used my influence to say things that weren't true about this man, and I've already told him I was terribly sorry about it, and we have been in continuous conversation since that day, since we talked and patched things up. I know his family from my youth, in fact, ladies and gentlemen, and that is a proud statement I make that on this day. He's a wonderful writer. He's an extremely insightful guy because he's spent the time to know how we got into this position and who's done it. And he brings forward a lot of great ideas, and I'm going to bring him up right now. His name is John Kaminski. John, are you with me?
Hello, Daryl.
Well, it's nice to have you back, John, on the French Connection as ever. You know, we're working toward 870 hours worth of interviews I've done.
That's excellent. I was just on IamTheWitness.com the other day reading the Hitchcock material.
Yes.
I must say that you have compiled one of the best repositories of important knowledge on the Internet.
Well, that $10 these days will get you a cup of coffee if nobody reads it. See, now, here's the big battle, John, that we've had. We've got a lot of people out there working overtime to try to steer people away from the truth, and I know you've got some insights into the control of the 9/11 truth movement and where it's actually taking itself to. Lately, I don't see it working as well for them as they had hoped, and they're actually starting to get desperate and do things like bring out assets like, in my view, assets like Charlie Sheen to try to say Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld did all of this stuff so that people will look away from the Israeli connection and the Zionist connection and actually stop pointing the finger at mid-level Americans that were certainly involved, but certainly not at the control point. Is that a fair statement to make?
Ooh, that was a lot of statement. Which part?
Well, the Charlie Sheen part, or the takeover of the...
Oh, that. Yeah, that's the Rosie O'Donnell syndrome, where they pick somebody who has a questionable reputation and make him make a truthful assertion and have it ridiculed by the press on the basis of his reputation rather than what he said.
Yes.
And Charlie Sheen and Rosie O'Donnell and James Brolin, I saw the other day, did something nasty, all fit in that category.
Well, but on top of that, what we have is somebody puffing him up from inside the so-called truth movement who has never, ever signed on to the facts. Of course, that person is Alex Jones, but the problem we have in our movement is that Alex Jones does carry a lot of people with him because he has been promoted so heavily.
Well, and why? Who do you think would be behind or have the ability to promote him so heavily?
Well, there you go. The same people we're fighting against.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, but that doesn't explain the halfway guys out there, and there are a bunch of halfway guys. You know, we can talk about Rentz's halfway stuff. He puts out a great article about one thing, and then he's got a picture of Bigfoot in the next one, and then he's got, you know, the nonsense mixed with truth mixed with nonsense again is by itself discrediting. And then we got Mr. Rivera over here pushing Alex Jones as though he's the next Messiah. It's frightening to think that people we've come to rely on at certain levels are only halfway measured in this battle.
Yeah, I really felt that way at the very beginning of the 9/11 skeptics movement, when the people that we had to rely on then were, just to name three, Mike Rupert, Jared Israel, and Gerard Holmgren. And, of course, Mike Rupert wrote a great book, but he turned out to be a shill for the oil companies and diverted all the early 9/11 conferences into discussions about peak oil. Jared Israel compiled that wonderful timeline of all the airplanes and what they did and when they did it and how the fighter jets from Otis Air Force Base were late, all of that. And it turns out he later moved back to Israel, and now the prevailing conclusion of the real 9/11 skeptics movement is that there were no planes. So that whole thing constructed by Jared Israel and the path that Mike Rupert took us down was set up beforehand to channel the focus of the people who didn't believe their bullshit official story to follow, and we all followed it, and they seemed like wonderful leads, but they all led to endless distractions and concealment of the fact that there were no planes. Now,
well, we can agree, John. We can agree to disagree at some level, because I do see impact evidence of planes on both of the trade centers. However, the one at the Pentagon is a nonsense.
Unmanned aerial vehicles at best, if they existed at all.
Well, but here's the other side of that, though. See, what we talked about privately for a few moments was that, as you said, it's a distraction, and what it does is we know who put the whole conspiracy together, because their henchmen are listed in detail and their activities in detail. So the simple fact of the matter is it's rather superfluous, and it causes derisions that end up causing you and I to spend time on things we shouldn't be bothering with.
Exactly right. By the way, there's a great email circulating around, passing around the website 800-Pound Gorilla, and it is really a tremendous compilation of all the Jews who were involved in all the aspects of 9/11.
Yeah, that one I think comes off of the site of Info Underground, and there's also another one on Patrick Grimm's site, or is it? Yeah, I think it's Patrick Grimm. However, in the same breath, we've got Patrick Grimm telling a lot of the facts about 9/11, but then he's going after the African American community, calling them the epithets and saying that they're subhuman. And I mean, the very thing that I loathe in other human beings, judging them for skin color or something, is exactly what he's doing. So he taints his work with nonsense. There are very few people out there sticking to their knitting and putting out a good quality research material. I find that most of them are ne'er-do-wells, or they've got an agenda.
Well, I'm mostly interested in the information and not the reputation, and you can generally tell the reputation from the information that they provide. As far as who's playing fair and who's playing for ulterior motives, I wonder if that isn't something in the past. I wonder if everybody hasn't shaken themselves out of a tree of their own accord at this point. Because even though a lot of people are still inveigled by, I get a lot of people telling me, oh, you got to listen to Alex Jones, he's got the great stuff, and I tell them that, yeah, but he always seems to forget the last step.
Yep,
and making the fateful connection. Rentz is a slightly different version of that. You were absolutely right about him years ago, Daryl, when you first started this.